Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. People forget that erasing someone from your life works both ways. Today in the rLounge, it's about a wedding that didn't meet the aesthetic, a son who didn't follow the script, and the very inconvenient moment when the people who disowned him suddenly needed him back. Parents ghosted me when I married someone outside the family's class. Now they want to reconnect for money. Bringing her home that first time should have been my warning sign. My mother did this thing where she looked her up and down like she was inspecting something at an auction. Asked where she summered. My wife just stared at her because who actually asks that question? My father checked his watch so many times I thought he had somewhere urgent to be. He didn't. He was just making a point. The holidays that year were tense. My mother pulled me aside into the study and closed the door. She had a smile on her face. You know, the one where the lips curve but the eyes stay cold. She's lovely, but is this really what you want? Someone without refinement? I told her I loved her and that should be enough. She kept smiling and said, "Of course," then changed the subject. I should have known then that nothing was actually resolved. I proposed a few months later. We were at this park near her mom's place. Nothing fancy, just us. She said yes. I called my parents right after because I was excited and stupid enough to think they'd be happy for me. My mother answered, told her that we were engaged. There was this long pause. Then she said that was certainly a choice. Then she hung up, just like that. The wedding planning phase was a nightmare. Every single suggestion my wife made was met with responses like, "That's interesting," or "How quaint." My mother kept pushing for venues that cost more than most people make in a year. She offered to pay for everything, but only if we used her planner, her caterer, her florist, her everything. She wanted to turn our wedding into some society event where she could show off to her friends. My wife tried to be accommodating at first. She really did. But after the fifth or sixth time my mother dismissed her ideas, I could see her shutting down. I finally had enough when my mother brought up a guest list. She wanted to invite over 300 people. We knew maybe 50 of them. The rest were business associates and society people my parents wanted to impress. When my wife suggested keeping it small with people who actually cared about us, my mother laughed. Actually laughed like it was the most absurd thing she'd ever heard. I told my parents we were doing a small ceremony with people who actually supported us. My father set down his drink and looked at me like I'd just announced I was joining a cult. "If you marry this girl, you're making a mistake that will follow you forever." I told him the only mistake was thinking they'd be happy for me. Then I left. My wife was waiting in the car. She asked how it went, and I just shook my head. We got married at a courthouse a few weeks later. My best friend from college and my wife's mom were our witnesses. I sent my parents a text with a photo afterward. No response. A few weeks went by before my mother finally replied. Just one text. "I hope you know what you've done to this family." That was it. No congratulations, no acknowledgement that I'd gotten married. Just disappointment wrapped up in one sentence. I tried calling a few times after that. My father answered once. He said we had nothing to discuss until I came to my senses, then hung up. My mother blocked my number entirely. I know because my calls went straight to a message saying the number was no longer accepting calls from me. My birthday that year came and went. 27 years of birthday calls from my parents and suddenly nothing. Not a text, not a card. Complete silence. My wife made it special. She organized a small thing with her family and our friends. Her mom baked a cake from scratch. It was one of the best birthdays I'd had in years. But there was still this hollow feeling knowing my parents had just erased me. The holidays were different without them. My wife's family welcomed me like I'd always been part of their lives. Her mom cried when we showed up with gifts. Happy tears. She kept hugging me and saying she was glad her daughter found someone good. The contrast between her reaction and my parents was almost painful. I found out through my aunt that my parents had been telling people I was traveling abroad for an extended period. They literally invented a story to avoid admitting I'd gotten married. When people asked about me at events, they'd just say I was overseas working on some project. They erased my wife from existence in their social circles. She never existed to them. I never got married. I was just away. My grandmother passed away early the next year. I found out 3 weeks later through a cousin who assumed I already knew. They had a funeral. They'd done the obituary. I wasn't informed. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even listed as a grandchild in the obituary. It was like I'd never existed. My sister was mentioned. My cousins were mentioned. I was just gone. That one hurt more than I expected. My grandmother and I had been close when I was younger. She used to sneak me cookies when my parents weren't looking and tell me stories about growing up during the war. And I didn't even get to say goodbye because my parents decided I wasn't family anymore. I ran into my father at a store a few months later. I was picking up groceries with my wife. He was in the wine section. We made eye contact. I actually opened my mouth to say something. He looked right through me like I was a stranger, turned and walked away. My aunt called me later that year to tell me my parents had been asked about me at some event. My mother apparently said they only had one child now, referring to my older sister. I'd been completely disowned, erased, like I'd never been born. My aunt sounded upset when she told me, like she expected me to be devastated. I just felt numb. My sister reached out not long after that. We never had been super close growing up. She was older and always busy with her own life. But she sent me a long message apologizing for not standing up for me. Said our parents were impossible and she understood why I stayed away. We started texting occasionally after that. My wife got pregnant. We were thrilled. Scared, but thrilled. I told my sister and she was excited for us. She asked if I was going to tell our parents. I actually laughed. Why would I tell them? So they could ignore that too? So they could pretend our grandchild didn't exist, just like they pretended my wife didn't exist? My aunt called, crying at some point during the pregnancy. She said my mother had been asking about me, wondering if I was still with that woman. My aunt told her we were married and happy and expecting a baby. My mother just said, and changed the subject. Not congratulations, not excitement about becoming a grandmother. Just, like my aunt had mentioned the weather. I posted a photo of our daughter a few weeks after she was born. My sister commented immediately with a bunch of heart emojis. My aunt commented too. Some of our friends commented. My parents' silence was deafening but expected. They'd made their choice years ago. My sister mentioned casually in a text that our parents' investments weren't doing so well. Something about bad decisions and market changes. I didn't ask for details. It wasn't my problem. They'd made it clear I wasn't family anymore. Their financial situation had nothing to do with me. The holidays that year were magical. Our daughter's first Christmas. My wife's family spoiled her with gifts and attention. Her mom made a huge meal. Everyone took turns holding the baby and taking photos. My parents still didn't know that she existed. I was fine with that. More than fine. They didn't deserve to know her. Then I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is your mother. We need to talk." I stared at it for a solid minute. 5 years of silence, and suddenly she needed to talk. I blocked the number without responding. 2 days later, a message from my father. "We've been trying to reach you. It's important. Family matters." I sent it straight to spam. Family matters. That was rich coming from people who disowned me. A week went by and my sister called sounding stressed. She said her parents had been calling her daily asking for my new number, my address, any way to contact me. She hadn't given them anything but wanted to warn me they were looking for me. I asked her what was going on. She told me our parents were in serious financial trouble. Some business deal had gone wrong. Some investments had tanked. They'd burned through a lot of their savings trying to fix it. It clicked immediately. They didn't want to reconnect. They didn't suddenly care about me or my wife or their granddaughter. They wanted money. After 5 years of treating me like I didn't exist, they wanted my help because they were in trouble. My aunt called next. She was crying again. Said my mother had been talking to her about losing everything and needed her son. I asked her directly if they wanted money. Long pause. Then she said she thought they wanted to reconnect. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. My aunt sounded offended that I was laughing, but I couldn't help it. Another email from my father came through a week later. This one was longer. He talked about family obligations at difficult times and how blood is thicker than water. He never once mentioned my wife by name. Never mentioned my daughter. Just vague statements about needing to come together as a family. 2 days later, my mother somehow got my wife's phone number. She called her directly. My wife answered, not knowing who it was. My mother introduced herself as the grandmother and said she wanted to meet her granddaughter. My wife asked who this was. My mother got irritated and said she was her mother-in-law. My wife said she didn't have a mother-in-law and hung up. My mother called me the next day from yet another number. I answered by accident while driving. She started immediately with, "We need to discuss your situation." I asked what situation. She said my family's situation. That they were struggling and needed help. I hung up before she could finish the sentence. My sister called again. Our parents had asked her to mediate between us. She'd refused. My sister told them they'd made their bed 5 years ago. They didn't speak to her for 3 years after that. I felt bad that she was getting caught in the middle, but I appreciated her standing up for me. I replied, Told him he'd said I made a mistake marrying my wife, that they'd erased me from the family, that they didn't come to my wedding, that they didn't acknowledge my daughter's existence, that now they needed something and suddenly I was family again. I told him no, just no. He responded later saying I was being emotional, that this was about survival, that we could discuss the past later. The next day, my mother sent an email with the subject, legal rights. I didn't open it. I forwarded it to my sister and asked if they were seriously threatening legal action. She said they'd been talking to someone about grandparent visitation, but it was all talk. They couldn't afford anything right now. That's why they needed money in the first place. The whole thing was surreal. These people had cut me out of their lives completely. Didn't tell me when my grandmother died, pretended I didn't exist at social events, erased my wife and child from their reality, and now they were talking about their rights? About what they deserved? The disconnect from reality was staggering. That's where things stand now. They're out of my life. From the start, they weren't reacting to a person you loved. They were reacting to an idea they didn't approve of. Family disagree about weddings all the time. It's everything after. Pretending you were abroad, excluding you from your grandmother's funeral, removing you from the obituary. That isn't hurt feelings or stubborn pride. That's a deliberate decision to cut someone out of existence. You don't do that accidentally. So when they suddenly reappeared once their finances fell apart, it's hard not to see the timing for what it is. There's no accountability, no apology, no acknowledgement of your wife or child, just urgency, pressure, and talk of family obligations. You didn't overreact by blocking them. You responded consistently to the reality they created. Do you have a similar story? Share it with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time. And please put your chair back where you found it.